Welcome to this first talk on the teachings of Master Linji. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to to share these teachings on 4 Sundays, the 4 Advent Sundays. And the subject of today is Master Linji, a good spiritual friend. My name is Brother Fabsa. I am a monk in the Plum Village tradition, and I currently live in the EIAB, European Institute of Applied Buddhism, in Waldbröl in Germany. The book that I will sometimes refer to is this book of our teacher. It's called Zen Battles, Modern Commentary on the Teachings of Master Linji by Thich Nhat Hanh. And as we can see, it's quite a thick book. And of course, that means that in 4 Sundays, we'll not go through the whole book. We'll not go by it line by line, but also in the spirit of Master Linji, the most important thing is to relax our body and mind, and we profit from it more. It's not about trying to understand everything and use our intellect. And in the spirit of Master Linji, it's much more important that we have a direct realization, not with the intellect. So if he saw that his students were thinking, were rationalizing, then he used a shout, or he used to beat his students to wake them up to the present moment, to reality. Today I will start with some historical context, and we'll look at some of the teachings of Master Linji and also some concrete ways of practice. The Buddha, he lived around for around 2,500 years ago. He lived in India, Nepal, India, and Buddhism came to China a couple of hundred years later, in around the 1st century before Christ. And Buddhism came to China by land via the west, and also by sea from the south. And Master Tanghoi is maybe the first one we really know that taught meditation in China, and that was in the year 200 to 280 is when he lived, and he taught meditation in modern Vietnam and in China. And our teacher wrote a book about him. And what is special about him is that normally in Buddhism we talk about Bodhidharma being the first Zen patriarch, bringing meditation, the school of meditation, from India to China. But he came a couple of hundred years later. And so we also know that there were already meditation masters before him, like Master Tanghoi. And when Buddhism came to China, Buddhism had to adapt to the culture, had to adapt to the climate. And so, for example, the monks more stayed in temples. In India, monks were on the way a lot, and in China, the monks were more staying in one temple, were not traveling as much, and used to take care of the temple and used to take care of the garden and everything. And so Buddhism in China was a different Buddhism than the Buddhism in India. And so sometimes we talk about Zen, or like Zen masters, or we talk about meditation masters, or in Vietnamese they say Thien, and in Chinese it's Chan. And so also Chinese Buddhism, we often talk about Chan, but we mean all the same. We mean the original word in Sanskrit is jhana, and sometimes I will say meditation master, or sometimes I will say Chan, and sometimes I will say Zen, but we mean the same. We will use it as synonyms. So, as I mentioned before, in the historical context, Bodhidharma is considered to be the first Zen patriarch. He was an Indian monk, and the story is that he lived in the 5th or the 6th century, and that he practiced meditation very diligently in a cave. And there was a monk, a Chinese monk, and his name was Datsu Huike, and he was standing there in the cold, in snow, waiting for an opportunity to ask Bodhidharma a question. And then finally, Bodhidharma came out, and he asked Huike, "What are you doing here?" And then Huike said, I want to ask you to calm my mind." And then Bodhidharma said, "Okay, bring out your mind and I will calm it for you." And then Huike said, "Yeah, but the problem is I cannot find my mind." And then Bodhidharma said, "If you cannot find your mind, it means I have already calmed your mind." And when Huike heard that, he had an experience of enlightenment. He understood. And so he became the second Zen patriarch in China and the first Chinese monk, as Bodhidharma was a monk from India. And so from generation to generation, it was passed on. And then there was this sixth Zen patriarch, and his name is Huineng. And Huineng is a very prominent figure in Chinese Zen Buddhism. And from him, there's a very famous sutra, which is called the Platform Sutra. And during his time, the practice of Zen in China slowly came to maturity. And he was one of the most influential Zen masters in history. And for him, it was not about intellectualization or about rationalization of the teachings, but it was all about direct insight and an immediate realization of one's own true nature. And so for him, the reliance on sutras and on commentaries was not so important. And it was the same for Master Linji, who came later. In the book, show it again. In the book, Tai also raises the question, like, maybe he was not the only sixth patriarch. He got a secret transmission in the middle of the night from the fifth patriarch, Hongren, but it's not sure that after him there were also like other patriarchs. Like one patriarch doesn't need to have one, doesn't need to transmit it to one person, so there can be several. It's the same in our tradition. We have many Dharma teachers that received the lamp from Tai. And so it means like there's not one successor of Tai, there's not one person following in the footsteps of Tai, but there's many. And so after Huineng, the sixth patriarch, there were 4 generations of Dharma teachers. In between Huineng and Linji, and that was on one hand was Nanyue Huairang, and after him came Matsu Daoyi, who lived from 709 to 788, and he was actually the first Zen master who shouted. So Master Linji was also known for shouting, but his grandfather or great grandfather teacher, Master Daoyi, he's the first one who we know who shouted. And a shout was a skillful means, and it came from direct insight. So the master saw that maybe the shout was the best way to reply to the situation and the practice level of the student. And so it came from deep insight. It was not about imitating the form. So we shouldn't just shout or beat people if we are not a Zen master ourselves and we don't have real understanding. Then there is Baijiang Huaihai, that's the grandfather teacher of Master Linji. And Master Huangbo is the teacher of was the teacher of Master Linji. And Master Linji lived during the declining years of the mighty Tang dynasty in the 9th century. And Master Linji lived from 810 to 867. And his teachings emphasize on direct experience, just like Master Huineng. And what we will talk about is the record of Master Linji, and that's written down by his students. It's not something that he has written himself. And in the practice of Zen, the monks were used to working hard and applying mindfulness in all aspects of daily life. And that's just the same. What we practice here is meditation not only on the cushion or on the chair. I'm sitting on a chair right now. But also to practice it when we eat, when we walk, when we open the door, when we speak, when we listen. So the emphasis was not on scholastic studies of the sutras and the commentaries, even though Master Linji had studied himself diligently as a young monk, but later on he decided to just follow the true Zen practice and follow masters who could help him realize meditation. And in our Plum Village tradition, when we receive the 5 mindfulness trainings, we are also a student. We are part of the Zen lineage of Master Linji. And then we also receive a lineage name. And for example, our teacher was of the 42nd generation of the Linji school. It says on the certificate. And the 8th generation of the Master Liu Quan Dharma line. Master Liu Quan lived from the year 1670 to 1742, and he himself was of the 35th generation of the Linji school. And Zen Master Liu Quan wrote a gatha, a verse, Chinese, Vietnamese. It's of course very small for you to see. It's also not so important, but the important thing is that he wrote a gatha, and that based on on our lineage name that we can see actually which generation we are. And so this is what order members or members of the order of interbeing who practice the 14 mindfulness trainings in our traditions. It's like bodhisattva vows. Or monastic members in our tradition, you might see this gatha on your certificate of ordination. And there's a translation of this verse. I would just like to read it. The great way of reality is our true nature's pure ocean. The source of mind penetrates everywhere. From the roots of virtue springs the practice of compassion. Precepts, concentration, and insight, the nature and function of all 3 are one. The fruit of transcendent wisdom can be realized by being wonderfully together. Maintain and transmit the wonderful principle in order to reveal the true teaching. For the realization of true emptiness to be possible, wisdom and action must go together. So in this verse, Tai's lineage name is Chung Guang, and Chung is the 8th character. And so we can see that Tai is of the 8th generation, and that many of us are the next generation. So for example, for myself, and we have a name, a lineage name, that starts with Tam. And so that's of the heart. And now the next generation after Tai passed away is Nguyen. is of the source. And so we're just following the Gata, and it means that, we'll for many generations will not run, will keep following the Gata, so we have many more generations to come. And so for Tai, he had his lineage name, which was Chunquang. Of course, we don't know him very well with that name. Monastic members and Order of Interbeing members, we also have a Dharma name. We don't only have the lineage name. And in the case of our teacher, his Dharma name is Fung Sun, is meeting the spring. And he also has a Dharma title, and that is Nyirkang. And Nyirkang means one action. And if we see the word Tit in front of his name, it means it's the Vietnamese word for Shakya. And Shakya is the Buddha's family name. And so every monastic member, every monk and nun in the Vietnamese Buddhist tradition has a name that starts with Tit. So for example, my full monastic name is Tit Chan Phap Sa. So it also starts with Tit, but we're not so familiar to use it all the time. And also Jan, we're not always using it. So it's just short, but this is the full monastic name. Thai was born in the year 1926 in Vietnam, and he entered the Hieu Root Temple to become a novice monk in central Vietnam in Hue when he was 16 years old. This is a picture of him transmitting the lamp to his next generation. And we, in our tradition, we say we become a Dharma teacher. And Thai became himself a Dharma teacher in the year 1966 in the Hieu Root Temple. And the full title of the text that we are studying of Master Linji is called The Recorded Sayings of Linji Huijiao Chanshu of Junzhou. And Master Linji lived in Junzhou, and that's an area over here, and we have an idea. Here is China, here is Taiwan, and then more in the northeast, close to Peking, there's he lived in this province, Zhengzhou, and that's a central part in the present Hebei in the northeast of China. And so in English we say the recorded sayings of Linji Huijiao Chanshu. Huijiao is a title that he got later. Chanshu is the Zen master, and in Chinese it is said they say like Linji Huijiao Chanshu Yu Lu, and in Vietnamese Lam Te Chue Chiu Thien Su Ngu Luk. His full name is Zen Master Linji Yisun, and Yisun is his monk's name, and Linji is the name of the temple where he lived, and is also the name of the mountain where he lived and taught. And Huijiao is the title that he got after he passed away, and that's called we can translate as illuminating wisdom. In this course, we'll look at this record, the record of Linji Lu, of Linji, and in Chinese we say Linji Lu, or sometimes he's better known under his Japanese name, which is Rinzai, and so Rinzai Roku is the record. And the record of Master Linji can be divided in two parts, and that's also what we can see in the book. Actually, you don't necessarily need to have the book. It's okay. You can follow also without the book. But the book has, of course, a lot of extra information. But I just want to mention that it's not 100% necessary. So there's the Zen battles, and there's the evening talks. And the Zen battles were more in the morning. There are also like formal sessions. And the formal sessions means that most of the monks were standing, but the master was taking the high seat. And these are the paragraphs 1 to 9. And the evening talks were more informal gatherings, more explanation teachings, where the master gave short Dharma talks. And these are the paragraphs 10 to 23. And in the time of Master Linji, a student would come up to ask a question. And you had to be courageous for this Zen battle. You had to be courageous because you could win or you could lose. And Master Linji was trying to break the tendency of his students to overthink. And he says, like, when the Dharma is at stake, when the teachings of the Buddha are at stake, you don't need to fear to come up to the battlefield and ask a question. And so he was shouting and hitting to wake his students up. And in this way, he was trying to help his students to break through obstacles and not to accumulate knowledge and not to rationalize and be lost in thinking. And so I would like to start with a short summary and some accounts of Master Linji's life. Master Linji, as being mentioned, he lived in the Tang Dynasty, practiced with his teacher Huangbo in a time when there was a lot of political instability in the 9th century in China, in a time in which many temples were destroyed and the monks and nuns had to return to lay life. But the north, where Master Linji lived, was not so much affected. And so that was good for him. He could stay a monk. And as a young monk in the temple of Master Huangbo, he went to, he was practicing, and the head monk asked him, actually, have you ever gone in Master Huangbo's room and asked him a question? And then Master Lin, or he was not master yet, Linji said, no, I have never done it, and I don't know what to ask. And if you don't know what to ask, then you can always ask, what is the essence of the Buddha's teachings? And so that's exactly what the young monk did. Linji went in, but before he could finish his question, he was beaten. He was hit with a stick, and so he went out. And the head monk asked, like, well, what happened? He said, like, well, I was hit. And then the head monk said, well, then go in a second time and ask him a second time. And again he was hit. And the headmaster said, go in a third time. And he was hit again. And then he was a bit confused. And so then he said, like, okay, I'd like to leave this temple for a while. And then Master Huangbo said, well, then I advise you should go to Master Dao Yu, and he will explain everything to you. So that's what he did. And he went to Master Dao Yu, and he said what had happened. And then he said, was I at fault or not? And then Dao Yu said, oh, Master Huangbo is such a grandmother that he makes all this trouble to help you, and now you come all this way to me and you ask me whether you're at fault or not. And at that time, Linji got a breakthrough, and he understood, and he said, like, oh, I see. There is not much to the teachings of Huangbo. And then Dao Yu grabbed him and he said, like, you little devil, first you come here all this way and you ask me whether you are at fault or not, and now you say there's not much to his teachings. What did you just see? What did you just realize? Tell me immediately now. And Linji then hit Dao Yu 3 times. And then Dao Yu, he pushed him aside and he said, like, anyway, you are Huangbo's student. You are not my business. And when Linji went back to his teacher, Huangbo, and he told him what had happened, and then Huangbo said, oh, how much I would like to get a hold of this Dao Yu and give him a good beating with the stick. And then Linji said, like, why do you say would like to? Have some right now. And he slapped his teacher. And then his teacher said, you lunatic, coming back here and pulling the tiger's whiskers. Of course, pulling the tiger's whiskers is something very dangerous to do. And you can also understand, like, challenging your own Zen master is something dangerous to do. And these accounts give an impression of the culture, of the character, also of the person of Master Linji, and also the character of the Zen battles with the sticks and with the shouting. And the sticks and the shouting are very direct ways to help us wake up to our own nature. And Master Linji and Huangbo actually showed a lot of love for their students. Maybe when we read it, maybe we just see the form and it looks very hard. But I think you can also see the love. So let's go immediately into the teachings and let's see how Master Linji showed his love. I would like to start with section 5, as Master Linji is talking about his own personal experience with his teacher in the past. And he said, 3 times I asked my master about the essential idea of the Buddha Dharma, and I was hit 3 times. But to me, it was as if he was rubbing my head with a branch of Artemisia. So something very soft, rubbing my head. And today I still feel nostalgia for the time that he beat me. Could anyone come up and help me relive that moment? And then, so it was an invitation for him. Like, I would like to relive that moment. I still miss that beating. Maybe it hurt, but it was a nice time and I felt his love. And for me, it was as if he was rubbing my head. And then a monk came up and he said, like, okay, I can do it. And then the master gave him the stick, but then he hesitated. And then the master hit him. And I like this section because it is apparent that he really felt the love of his teacher. And maybe when he visited Dayu and he said, like, oh, there's not much to the teachings, maybe that's something that he realized, that actually there was a lot of love from his teacher. And so he saw the gentleness, the love of his teacher, and for him it was as if, his head was gently being rubbed. And the monk hesitated. So he got the stick, but he hesitated. And the hesitation is a moment of death. It means like you cannot go forward. Master Linji wanted to relive that moment with his teacher, and so somebody should be able to play the role of his teacher. But the moment of hesitation was a moment of failure. The monk was not able to help relive that moment because he was not able to take the place of the teacher. In Master Linji's language, it's like he was not able to be the host. So there's the guest and the host is the position of the teacher. And so he was not able to help the master relive the moment. And understanding has to come directly in the moment and not let a moment of doubt arise in your mind. In section 2, we can also see a real Zen battle, and I would like to read it. The Venerable Magu stepped out and asked, of all the 1,000 eyes and arms of the Bodhisattva of compassion, Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, which is the chief eye? The master said, of all 1,000 eyes and arms of the Bodhisattva of compassion, which is the chief eye? Speak quickly. Magu pulled the Zen master down from the throne and sat down himself. The Zen master came close and said, you don't understand. Magu was perplexed. The master pulled Magu down and sat on the throne himself. So how can we understand this Zen battle? So the monk Mayu, he stepped forward to ask a question. And the question was, of all the 1,000 eyes and arms of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, which one is the chief eye? Which one is the main eye? And the Bodhisattva of compassion is often painted, is depicted as someone, as a great being with 1,000 hands. So he can do a lot. There's a lot of action. But there's not only action in each hand, there's also the eye of wisdom. So it means that wisdom and action go together, as we just read in the Gatha. Wisdom and action go together. And this means his actions do not come from despair, or do not come from restlessness, or do not come from desire. But his actions come from understanding of what needs to be done, and also what should not be done, or what is good to say and what is better not to say. Which is the chief eye? And so for most of us, we have two eyes, and I don't think of having a chief eye. Also, my hands, I have two hands, I don't see as a chief eye, even a chief hand, even though I'm right-handed. So maybe that's why also the student thought like I'm right. Maybe the student was also right-handed, and he thought like I'm right-handed, and so maybe the chief eye is in the hand, in the main hand. Maybe Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara also has a main hand. And Master Linji could have answered in several ways. He could have shouted, he could have used a stick, but he chose to throw the question back. And so he said, of all the 1,000 eyes and arms of Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, which is the chief eye? Speak quickly. Means like, don't think about it. Find your own answer. Answer quickly. You don't have the time to think about it. Say immediately what comes up in you. If you let your intellect work, then you have already lost. And in the end, we have to all find our own answer. And true wisdom doesn't come from outside. And the teacher tries to help you to manifest the wisdom that is already in you. He cannot give it to you, but he can help you to sow, to water that seed of insight that is already there. True wisdom needs the right conditions in order to manifest from within, and Master Linji was doing his best to let this true wisdom arise in his students. The wisdom is not the fruit of the intellect alone. In fact, in the spirit of Master Linji, thinking can be a great obstacle for wisdom to manifest. And in the Zen language of Master Linji, there's the role of the guest, which is usually the student, and the role of the host. And Master Linji was playing the role of the host. And when Master Linji threw the question back at Mayu, Mayu thought, oh, well, you're asking me the question, so I am now the host and I should take the high seat. So he pulled Linji out of the high seat, and Linji came close again, and he said, you don't understand. And in fact, you don't understand. It's actually a matter of saying like, how do you do? And it's like the threefold action of respect. At that time, it is like joining our palms, bowing, and asking about how the other person is doing. And so he said like Bushan. And Bushan was a ritual expression. And this ritual expression means, well, how do you do? And Mayu was perplexed. So he didn't know how to respond to the situation. So he failed as a host. He was sitting in the high position, but because he was confused, he was perplexed, that's why he failed in that position. So Master Linji pulled him down again and reclaimed the position of the host. And oftentimes we think we can find answers by thinking. And in this style of Zen, koans are being used to break this habit. And koans are questions that cannot be solved by the intellect. They are questions that are sown in the depth of our consciousness. In Buddhist psychology, we speak of a store consciousness where all the seeds are maintained and held, and that is like the earth. And the mind consciousness is like the gardener. And in koans, we do not rely on the role of the gardener that much. We mainly rely on the function of store consciousness. Just like the gardener also trusts that the earth will bring back will bring up the flowers of the seeds that are being sown. And so the role of the gardener is just to keep mindfulness upright and to take care of the earth and not do the work of the earth. And so we live our life. That question has been sown in the depth of our consciousness, and we just allow it to work. And with our practice of mindfulness, then at one day we'll come to a breakthrough. We plant a seed in the earth and make sure that the seed has enough warmth, water, nutriments, and then we just have to rely on the earth. And so for us, it's just about living mindfully, making sure that the seed gets enough water. The water from living mindfully, mindfulness, concentration, and insight go together. In section 10, during an evening session, the master talked about the 4 arrangements, and that's the 4 ways of helping people. And there are different ways to respond to a student, and the master will try to answer the student in a way that fits both the situation and the level of practice of the student. And the 4 arrangements are: we can remove the object without removing the subject. We can remove the subject without removing the object. We can remove both, or we can remove none. Okay, what does it mean? I think the best is just to read, because the monks also asked, what does it mean? So we can just let the master answer the question by himself. A monk asked, what does it mean to eliminate the person, but not the object of the person's perceptions? The master replied, the sun rises, making the earth an embroidery. The child's hair hangs down, white as silk threads. So it's a very poetic response of the teacher. The sun rises, making the earth an embroidery. The child's hair hangs down, white as silk threads. And so both the object and subject play a role in our perception. When we suffer, when we have a difficult time, we can be aware of all the things that we think have contributed to the difficulty that we have. So we are very aware of the external conditions. But the suffering also comes from our own mind. And that is important to understand. It's also about the way that we perceive reality. So we may be 2 people and we have exactly the same experience, but maybe we don't suffer the same. Or maybe for me, it is not a big suffering, because it also has to do with the mind that perceives the environment. I remember one time when I was attending our teacher Tai in France in the year 2004. I was still a young monk, and and our teacher asked me a question. He asked me, like, why do you think it is that in the same environment, the same teacher, the same food, the same brothers and sisters, the same activities, that some are happy and others are not. And of course, there are several ways that we can reply to that question, but my personal experience at that time from a few days before that made me answer in this way, that I said, like, it very much has to do what we pay attention to. And the experience was that I was talking to a young monk, a monk who was just ordained, and he was complaining about everything that was happening in the community. And so he noticed all the things that were broken, that were not being fixed. And so he was very mindful of everything that was not going well. And I listened to him, and then I was walking a little bit, and I noticed, wow, I'm really unhappy now. And then I thought, yeah, I'm really unhappy because he just didn't see anything positive. He only saw what is negative. But it is not true. Like, now my view is also distorted. I don't see everything. And so I had to try to complete my picture again. And so I named for myself all the things that I was grateful for. And so I was grateful for my teacher, grateful for the practice, grateful for the supportive energy of the Sangha, grateful for the food, for the water, grateful for the joy of living together. And then I felt so much better. And so our suffering very much depends on our own mind, and much more than on our environment. And that's something that we can see very clearly. The Buddha, he lived a very simple life, hardly had anything. Mahatma Gandhi didn't have much, and they are happy people, and just content with just enough, and seeing that happiness does not come from so much from external conditions, but mainly about how we train our mind. And so the teacher responded to the question, what does it mean to remove the person but not the objects? And the master replied, yeah, what does it mean to eliminate the person but not the object of the person's perceptions? The master replied, the sun rises, making the earth an embroidery. The child's hair hangs down, white as silk threads. And so when the sun rises, then we can see. So maybe in the night we don't see much. And mindfulness is often seen as a light. And so when we walk through the forest, and there may be many beautiful things, but when we're not mindful, it is as if we're going in the dark, because we don't see anything anyway. We're not really there for the wonders. We're lost in our thinking. And so the sun rises, and making the earth an embroidery, it can be very beautiful. The mindfulness is there, and we can recognize all the beautiful things. So these things are not by themselves alone. Our way of looking, our mindfulness also plays a part. And if we forget that, we get a very distorted view of reality, just like the impossibility in China in the time of Master Linji to have a child with white hair, like all the children had black hair. This first arrangement is not easy. It is much easier to let go of an object than to let go of our own mind. We are usually quite attached to our mind and to our way of looking. However, we may help a person to see more of the object. So in my case, when I was talking to that younger brother, and if I had at the moment had the right insight, I might have helped him and help him see all the positive elements in the community. And so he would have seen more of the environment, and not only the negative things, but also to see the positive things, and by that to help him change his mind. And in case of removing the object but not the person, we might say, okay, forget about the environment. Please recognize your unhappiness. Come back to your breathing. Feel the tension in your body. Feel the tension in your mind. And so mind and object, of course, they inter-are. We have the mind, and there's the object of mind. And that is something very important in Buddhism, to understand that in a perception, subject and object arise at the same time. And oftentimes it is very good, and that's the second case. It's very Buddhist to remove the object and to come back to our own mind and to take care of ourselves. And in the case of my younger brother, I might have said, oh, I see, it's not easy for you. I don't follow so much the story. I just focus on the person. And so I could have said something like, oh, yeah, it's difficult for you. I see that. And let us breathe together. Let us relax. Let us sing a song, depending on the situation and the person we are talking to. And also in question and answer sessions with our teacher, I also remember that I also very often took away the object. So if somebody would ask a question and would complain about the partner or the child, very difficult, or the parents, then I would bring it back to the person who is complaining, to the mind, to the perceiving mind. And you have to recognize your own part. And subject and object of perception are not two different things. They are not separate. If we think they are separate, we fall into the trap of double grasping, thinking that our perceptions have nothing to do with our own mind. And then there's a third case. It's removing the object and the person and the subject. And in the book, Tai also describes a kind of very deep meditation in which the subject and the object are both removed, and there's no perception and there's no non-perception. And there's a lot of calmness in this state where we're not seeing anything, we're not hearing anything, there's no perception, and there's also no non-perception. There is emptiness. There's a great calm and blissful state. And then after that, we may be able to see things more clearly. And then there's the case in which neither the object nor the subject are being removed, and that is being described as communication with the environment is there again. It's like peace after a time of war. And so if we take the object away or we take the subject away, then we know it's not perfect, but it may be very helpful. It's not perfect because object and subject both play a part. And in this last case, there is harmony again. The mind and the object of mind are in communication again. So what we can learn from this is that we can always learn better ways to get unstuck and also to help other people get unstuck. And there's much more than only the shouting and the hitting. And so instead of replying immediately to a certain situation, we can take time to come back to ourselves and to stop and to reflect and to see what is most helpful. In another paragraph, paragraph 19, Master Linji also talks about 4 other kinds of arrangements, and that those are the arrangements of guest and host. And usually the guest is the student and the host is the master. And the master is also called the good spiritual friend in the language of Master Linji. And the good spiritual friend has to be very skillful to help the student. It's not about absolute truth, it's about recognizing what kind of medicine will work. And these 4 arrangements of guest and host, the roles of the guest and the host are not always fixed. And that is what we can see in these arrangements. Sometimes the guest is successful and becomes the host, and sometimes the host is unsuccessful and becomes the guest. And the case, for example, also where the guest remains the guest is not very successful, because it means that the host has not been able to help the guest. The good spiritual friend has not been able to help the guest. And the host, the teacher, may remove the object or may remove the subject. That depends on the situation and depends on the level of practice of the student. And Master Linji describes a student who would rather die than to let go. And the good spiritual friend encourages the student to let go of his ideas, let go of his attachments, his way of doing things. So he tries to help, but the student actually rather dies than to let go, and doesn't want to change his ways. And even the Buddha had many students who were like this. And the Buddha said, I just show the way, but finally they have to do it themselves. And sometimes the guest does become the host, and that is wonderful. That is very successful on the part of the guest. It means that he's not being deceived, he doesn't fall into the traps, and is master over the situation. He doesn't behave as a victim, but he is master over the situation. And if both are master over the situation, then we have 2 hosts. And if both are not master over the situation, we have 2 guests. And so to be a good spiritual friend requires a lot of skill, and we need a good capacity to really to listen deeply in order to understand. And only then can we prescribe the right kind of medicine. And the Bodhisattva who's very good at deep listening is Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of great compassion. And that's a very powerful energy that's present in each one of us. And we, even with 1,000 arms, we can do a lot. We have a lot of energy, but we also need to understand. We need to have the eye in the hand to understand what is effective and what is ineffective. So let us just sit and breathe and listen to the text of this wonderful Bodhisattva.
We invoke your name, Avalokiteshvara. We aspire to learn your way of listening in order to help relieve the suffering in the world. You know how to listen in order to understand. We invoke your name in order to practice listening with all our attention and open-heartedness. We will sit and listen without any prejudice. We will sit and listen without judging or reacting. We will sit and listen in order to understand. We will sit and listen so attentively that we will be able to hear what the other person is saying and also what is being left unsaid. We know that just by listening deeply, we already alleviate a great deal of pain and suffering in the other person.
We have a song that we sing in our tradition, which is a practice song, and it's called Breathing In, Breathing Out. And it's a song that we often sing, and it reminds us that we can all be fresh, solid, still, and free in this present moment. We don't need to wait for anything. It is already there, and we can touch these seeds, and they are wonderful qualities of a good spiritual friend. Then we are a good spiritual friend for ourselves with the freshness, the stability, the freedom, and we can also offer that to the people around us. And we see that not only we profit from these good qualities, but everyone we come into contact with. And to be fresh means that we can smile. It's a great gift to have people around us who are not stressed, who are master over the situation, and who are fully present without being overwhelmed. And to be solid means that we are not being swept away by our emotions. We are as stable as a mountain in a storm. This stability is not only our stability, but it also stabilizes our environment. It's like a captain remaining calm on the ship, and the whole crew profits from it. And to be still means that we can see clearly, and it's like the water of the lake that may be very calm and reflects everything that is without distortion, and our mind can become like that. And to have a lot of space means we are not caught, and we have a lot of space for ourselves, and we have space for others. Sometimes we have a bucket that is already full, and there's the last drop of water that is the last condition for the bucket to overflow. And to have space means we also have space in our bucket, and there can be many drops of water. Many drops of water can flow in, because we are not full. We are free. We are free as the night sky, and we can see a vast amount of space. And that vast amount of space is also the space that we can have in our heart. And stability and freedom are two characteristics of nirvana. So let us sing this song together. Breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out. I am blooming as a flower. I am fresh as the dew. I am solid as a mountain. I am firm as the earth. I am free. Breathing in, breathing out. Breathing in, breathing out. I am water reflecting what is real, what is true. And I feel there is space deep inside of me. I am free, I am free, I am free. So we can listen or sing this song regularly to help us to come back to our breathing, restore our calm, our freshness, our stillness, our freedom. And we also have a Plum Village app that we can install on our phone, and then we can enjoy listening to the sound of the bell every 15, 30 or 16 minutes. And that's also a wonderful opportunity to remind ourselves regularly to come back to our body, to our breathing, and to release the tensions. And in this way, to be our own best spiritual friend. Thank you for your presence.